Welcome to Talk Gnosis. Tonight we are discussing Halloween. Is it some spooky, creepy holiday? Does it go back to the pagan days? Is it satanic? Well, we're going to find out all of these things tonight on Talk Gnosis. Hello, Bishop Peterson.
Hello, Bishop Canterbury.
We want to welcome Deacon Michael Strojan from the AGC. Hello, Michael. How are you?
Doing well, Bishop. How are you?
Very, very good. Let me move this a little bit from my face now. It's trying to give it a little bit of the creepy factor in the beginning.
The evil Sith Bishop.
That is it. So, tonight we're going to be discussing Halloween, and I think it's pretty funny this time of year. I think anybody on social media will probably see everything from, pagans celebrating it as one of their holidays to Christians. I just seen something in my news feed before the show, actually, from the Coptic Orthodox Church, one of their bishops from the Southwest, kind of talking about the evils of Halloween and how it shouldn't be celebrated. Is there, you guys think there's a happy medium? What do you think is actually the truth behind Halloween? Maybe I'll start with you, Bishop Peterson. You got any input on Halloween here for our viewers?
Well, as you know, I was a teenage Pentecostal, and I remember stopping the celebration of Halloween when I was a teenager. I even though I used to love it. So when my family would go out and get pumpkins for jack-o'-lanterns, I would get a pumpkin, but I wouldn't carve it. And I would roast the pumpkin seeds, of course, and then I would get little gourds and make a fall arrangement with it. But yeah. That was the big thing going on back then, was that, Halloween was a bad idea because it was all about Satanism and ghosts and supernatural things that Christians had no business messing around in. And so then you'd have churches that would have harvest festivals instead, and they would try and separate that from the idea of Halloween, which of course some people pointed out that the Celtic festival of Samhain around that time was actually a harvest festival, or an end of the season festival, and therefore these Christians who were trying to avoid pagan practices were actually being more pagan than they originally were. So I mean, I think some scholars will argue that Halloween is basically we remember our dead around this time of year. The church did this because they wanted to adopt some old pagan practices and kind of mesh them in to make things more comfortable for the people. Other people have questioned that, but I think that this is a really powerful time of year for those of us, maybe not so much when we're kids, but as we get older, when we've lost friends and family members, this can be a very powerful time of year as we remember them.
I know for me, I am approaching just in a few days my 30-year anniversary as being a member of clergy within the Gnostic Church, and it started actually on Halloween. It was kind of a several-day process. It was Halloween through November the 4th, and started off with initiations in various esoteric organizations over a period of several days, and then on the 4th received my minor orders within the Gnostic Church. So for me, I mean, Halloween and that whole entire time of All Saints Day, All Souls Day, etc., have a kind of a special meaning for me. I know that many of the Christians would argue that this was our holiday first, with All Saints Day, All Souls Day. You would have others who would argue that no, the Christians kind of borrowed primarily from some of these kind of Celtic, backgrounds. And as you mentioned, things like Samhain, which I always get a kick when I hear self-proclaimed Wiccans and pagans call it Samhain. It's like, really, you're using a holiday that you don't even know how to pronounce. Okay. Now, I definitely want to get, Michael's view on this. Deacon Michael, I know you've got some opinions on this.
You think that Deacon Michael Strojan would actually have an opinion?
I never have opinions on anything.
My guess is maybe.
No, I'm sure he doesn't. He has mighty truths to share with all of us. So please, Sir Deacon, enlighten us.
Well, I guess since we kind of talked about your guys' backgrounds, I grew up in a mixed rite household. My mother was Lutheran, my dad was Catholic, and pretty early on in their controversial marriage, they became Episcopalians. By which I mean they would go to a funeral or a wedding here and there. We weren't terribly that religious. And adding to that, growing up in a rural area, Halloween was kind of a big thing for us. I mean, we grew a lot of pumpkin, depending on the year, or if our neighbors were growing them as well. We had our, little haunted house down the road, and the fair would open up around this time of year to have their own haunted house, which was absolutely a blast. So from a religious perspective, I would say my family enjoyed Halloween as a fairly secular holiday. I don't remember not dressing up any time between, well, goodness, since I was about 18 months to, heck, even today. So for me, Halloween's never been a controversial holiday. Now, insofar as the religious end, I do think that there is a happy medium between this contrived debate of whether it's a Christian holiday or a pagan holiday or what have you. The truth of the matter is that it's not quite that simple. Halloween, as you've noticed, Bishop Laney, came from the Celtic holiday Samhain or Samhain or Samhain. Also, I will note that the pronunciation on those do vary. So there's that. But there also seems to be a little bit of playing back and forth between Christians and pagans during the Christianization of the British Isles. And in fact, there's a good chunk of our Halloween traditions that come from Germanic mythology as well.
So it's the thing that interests me is that, and I guess it really shouldn't be that interesting, because you think about the end of summer, things are dying. The trees are turning color. The crops have been harvested. We're preparing for a season of things being frozen, and also a fairly harsh season in many places in Europe, at the very least. And particularly in the Nordic countries as well. So it's a time of year where people are preparing for the end of things, or for a cycle to end.
Right. And actually, one of the things that I would like to point out is the celebration of All Saints' Day, or Hallows Tide, as we come to call it in the West, actually doesn't come much earlier than the 9th century in Western Europe. In fact, even to this day, many of the Orthodox churches celebrate it sometime between August and September.
Interesting.
Which naturally does coincide with agricultural events as well in the area.
Sure. Sure. So.
Let me throw this question out for both of you guys as well, is that, many within I think within the esoteric community, as well as those within the pagan communities, sometimes I think kind of view this this particular time as that period where, I don't know, the period between where those on Earth can communicate with those of the dead. We are at that cusp of maybe that veil, being thin. For those who are esoterically minded, or those who are involved in various things, whether it's for divination, various esoteric stuff, or even various rites, do you guys put much credence to this particular time of the year? Do you think it can be a more powerful time of the year for esoteric practices?
For me personally, a good chunk of my background, at least academically, and just because of my sheer interest in the ancient Mediterranean, for me, I would associate it more with the period between what we would call Christmas and probably Candlemas. What we do know is that around what we have as Christmastide was the Feast of Saturnalia, where things were being thrown upside down, quite literally, socially speaking. But a lot of this also harkens back to an earlier celebration, which is called Antisteria, which was a celebration of Dionysus. And it's around this time of year that the dead do come back to life. There were various apotropaic rites, rites to protect people from the effects of ghosts, as well as, ceremonies for the dead and everything like that. And that typically took place around that time of the year. For me personally, of course, being a product of my culture and time, Halloween time, this time of year, does have a particular chill to it. But insofar as religious, I observe the religious holidays that we have within our tradition, but I don't view it as any particularly more or less potent than the other times of year that one could possibly do so.
I think for me, the question about, divination comes up. Certainly people seem to ask for divination around this time of year, but that's primarily because people want people to read cards at parties, Halloween parties. Right. And so I think that there's that aspect. I think and there's the associations, as Deacon Strojan brings up. There's cultural associations that can make it hard to pick through how much is something that we're actually experiencing spiritually, versus the constant saturation, the cultural saturation that we live under. I think for me, as I said before, for me, as I've got older, more and more people are dying around me, and parents, friends, relatives, and whatnot. And as a result, the time of year becomes a lot more sober for me. And it's also in the face of seeing the cultural emphasis on horror and blood and gore. There's been a whole, zombie renaissance over the past, 5, 6, 8 years. And I sometimes wonder just what's going on there in a culture that seems to want to hold death at bay, but also will try and control how much it actually confronts in the form of zombie movies or whatnot. I find that fascinating, but it's something that also, causes me it gives me some pause to meditate on. So, yeah.
Yeah, I do kind of find it interesting, kind of that recently. Well, I don't know if it's recent, but maybe it's just more awareness of it. But sort of, at least culturally, right now, kind of our fascination with things like death and, like you said, like zombies. I can tell our viewers out there, I'm a big fan of The Walking Dead. Watch it religiously, and I know that there are probably many of our viewers who are the same. I know we just recently received a letter from one of our viewers regarding Gnostic themes in TV shows, and had asked about The Walking Dead. Michael, your inputs in some of this?
Could you clarify, please?
Well, I guess just kind of the idea of things like the living dead, the dead. Sort of the bond that we have with death. Do you think that this is something that is just more cultural now? Do you think it is dependent maybe upon this time of the year? Or do you think this is just maybe a cycle that we're just sort of seeing as, a cultural trend?
Goodness, there are a lot of ways to view it. I tend to default to cultural cycles when it comes to things like this. There actually was a really fascinating study that I saw, I believe it was about a year ago. I believe it was also on crack.com, so take that with a grain of salt. But one of the interesting things was noting that how during periods, at least in American culture, when we have a Democratic president, there seems to be more of an emphasis on vampire movies, and when there tends to be Republican presidents, there tends to be more emphasis on zombies and so forth. So, naturally, not to make this into a political thing, we are living in a period of crisis in American culture. How real that crisis is, I don't pretend to know, but it's being fed to us through the media, so we tend to go with the flow on that. Now, insofar as this time of the year goes, well, I think, again, we can also look at agricultural societies during times when the fields are starting to be harvested and laying fallow. There is kind of that sense of emptiness, and that emptiness also leads to an otherworldliness. And I think we can see things like this in a variety of different cultures, both in the northern and in the southern hemispheres as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do want to touch bases, for a while before we have to end this and get into our After Dark program. But I think something that, since we're sort of talking about afterlife and kind of that bridge, I think there's probably a wide variety of Gnostic ideas on the afterlife. I think if you were to ask 15 Gnostics, you'll probably get 15 different answers.
Absolutely.
Some may believe in reincarnation. Some may believe in absolutely nothing at all. Some may believe in the concept of maybe of a paradise or a heaven. Others may believe, basically being just going right back to the source. Mm-hmm. Any of you want to kind of share maybe your ideas of afterlife and how that may even tie into this Halloween season?
How about you go first, Deacon Strojan?
Absolutely. In fact, I had prepared a little bit of statement for this.
All right.
I know, right?
So prepared.
So first, naturally I have to preface this with what I'm about to state is not the official opinion of the Apostolic Johannite Church and so forth. That being said, I've done some research into the matter, especially my concern primarily is in modern Gnosticism. Mm-hmm. So, getting to the punch, there's presently nothing explicitly stated about death in the Apostolic Johannite Church's Statement of Principles. Mm-hmm. That's kind of a surprise, because if you look at like the Nicene Creed or the Apostolic Creed, you have this idea of, death and resurrection and so forth. Naturally, to Gnostics, this means something slightly different. In the Sacramentary, however, we do find a few glimpses towards a general Johannite theology, or at least contemporary Johannite theology. Mm-hmm. The introductory rites for the rite of burial state, quite at the beginning, we are met together here today to celebrate the passing into a higher life of so-and-so, and towards the end, we must therefore endeavor to lay aside the thought of our personal loss and dwell upon his or her great and glorious gain. Now, that could easily be said by an Anglican or a Catholic or anyone else. We tend to want to think the best of those who we've known who have passed away. Mm-hmm. Yet, nonetheless, this is not particularly interesting. But one of the things that I find really fascinating is in the creed of our predecessor church, the Johannite Church of the Primitive Christians. Here, I think we gain a little bit more insight into the development of a Johannite conception of death. In the very beginning of the creed, I believe it's the 4th article, it states, "I believe that all exists only through God, and in God, and that all the parts of the universe created, formed, and constituted in time by an active divine providence are destined also to undergo in time, after their dissolution, other modes of existence, according to what is prescribed by the supreme and eternal intelligence, will, and justice of God. Consequently, I believe in another life for man, the nature of which is no way given to human intelligence to know." How very French and how very 19th century. So one of the things that I would like to point out, and as you mentioned, Bishop Ken, ask 15 Gnostics what they think, and you'll find 15 answers. Because I have a close connection and friendship with our friends with Ecclesia Gnostica, one of the things that I would like to point out in their catechism that I find very fascinating is that they don't necessarily subscribe to reincarnation, which I know many of our other Gnostic churches believe in some kind of reincarnation or metempsychosis. Mm-hmm. So I think really what this is more or less a call toward is a call towards like an ecumenical approach of how we can discuss and maybe uncover what happens after death.
I think that is a very splendid statement, Brother Strojan. I appreciate what you've had to say, and I know you and I have talked about this in the past, so I'm looking forward to the After Dark podcast where we can hopefully explore this a little bit more, because I think this is a very interesting line of discussion. We are going to have to move on, however, to conclude this episode of Talk Gnosis. And first of all, as always, we want to thank folks for joining us. We do want to hear from you. Is Halloween just a time for you to dress up and eat candy, or does it have some other kind of significance for you? And let us know in the comments section below the YouTube video. Also, we want to remind folks that if you are a Patreon supporter, you may be able to sit in on the taping of our After Dark podcast, which we will be doing right after this show. If you're not a Patreon supporter, you'll be able to view the podcast at talkgnosis.gnosticnyc.com. Probably within 5 days to a week, we'll have that After Dark podcast up, and you can listen to it. You can listen to it online. You can also stream it from iTunes or Stitcher. And if you do enjoy our shows and find them helpful, please do consider becoming a patron. You can go to patreon.com/Gnostic, patreon.com/Gnostic, and pledge a small amount per video or podcast. And yes, you can cap the amount that you spend each month with us, and every penny that you donate does support the development of this program. We also have a little bit of news, and that is that the Voices of Modern Gnosticism panel will be taking place on November 8th in the Boston area. If you are, our own Father Tony will be part of that panel, and if you are interested in going to this panel, you can go to www.moderngnosticism.org and get all the details from there. And finally, we always do appreciate your feedback and comments. You can certainly visit us on Facebook. You can leave comments underneath our videos, or you can send us an email at talkgnosis@gnosticnyc.com. So again, we want to thank you so much for joining us tonight, and I personally want to wish you a very happy and fun and safe Halloween.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Boo.
Boo.
This has been a production of the Gnostic NYC Network. For more information about this and all of the Gnostic... This has been a production of the Gnostic NYC Network. For more information about this and all of the Gnostic NYC Network programming, visit GnosticNYC.com. The opinions expressed in this show do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Gnostic NYC or any other organization.
On there, so.
This show has been released under a Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike 4.0 International License.